The voicemail arrived at 11:47 p.m. Mumbai time on a Tuesday in March. Anya Sharma was scrolling through her phone before bed when she saw her sister's name flash across the screen. She almost didn't listen to it immediately. Priya called every Sunday like clockwork, sent cheerful texts throughout the week about her classes and the Dubai weather and the latest Bollywood film she'd watched online. A voicemail on a Tuesday night felt off, but Anya assumed it was something small. Maybe Priya wanted to share gossip about her roommates or complain about an assignment. She pressed play and heard her sister's voice. But it wasn't the confident, carefully optimistic Priya who usually narrated her perfect Dubai life. This voice was shaking. "Hi Anya, I need you to listen carefully. I'm speaking in English first in case anyone checks my phone later, but I'll switch to Hindi in a moment. If anything happens to me, if I go silent, or if you hear I've had an accident or done something to myself, don't believe it. I would never. You know I would never. There's a man, his name is Rashid, Sheikh Rashid Al-Maktoum. Remember that name. He's powerful here, his family controls things, and I've made a terrible mistake getting involved with him. I thought it was different. I thought he loved me. But I'm starting to understand that I'm not a person to him. I'm a problem, and problems get solved here in ways that terrify me." The voicemail switched to rapid Hindi then, Priya's words tumbling over themselves. Ananya sat up in bed, her heart hammering. Her sister talked about being pregnant, about refusing to terminate, about lawyers and threats and feeling trapped in an apartment she couldn't legally leave because the lease belonged to him. She talked about going to the consulate in the morning, about needing to get evidence somewhere safe, about being followed. The message cut off abruptly mid-sentence. Just silence, and then the automated voice saying there were no more messages. Anya tried calling back immediately. The phone rang and went to voicemail. She sent texts, nothing. For 3 hours, she stayed awake, trying every method of contact she could think of. WhatsApp showed Priya's status as online briefly around 2 a.m. Mumbai time, 11 p.m. Dubai time, but she didn't respond to messages. Then the status went offline and never returned. By morning, Anya had convinced herself she was overreacting. Priya was probably fine, probably just exhausted and emotional. Maybe she'd had a fight with a boyfriend Anya didn't know about, and dramatized the situation in a moment of panic. Priya had always been the dramatic one, the storyteller, the one who made small incidents into grand narratives. But Sunday came and Priya didn't call. Monday passed with no word. By Tuesday, Anya had contacted her sister's roommates in Dubai, who said they hadn't seen Priya in 4 days, that she'd stopped coming back to the apartment weeks ago, actually, had moved somewhere else but kept it vague about where. On Wednesday, Anya's father filed a missing person report with both Indian and UAE authorities, navigating the bureaucratic maze of international jurisdiction and language barriers. On Thursday morning, the Indian consulate in Dubai called the Sharma family home in Mumbai. They were very sorry to inform them that Priya Sharma's body had been discovered in the desert region near Hatta, approximately 80 kilometers from Dubai. The preliminary police report indicated suicide. There would need to be identification of the body, arrangements for repatriation, many difficult logistics ahead. They offered their condolences for this tragic loss. Anya listened to her father take that call, watched him age a decade in the span of 30 seconds, heard her mother's wail of grief from the kitchen where she'd been preparing lunch that would go uneaten. And she thought about that voicemail, about Priya's shaking voice saying she would never do that, would never harm herself, about a name whispered in fear. Sheikh Rashid Al-Maktoum. The investigation would prove long and frustrating, and ultimately incomplete. But the story of what led to that moment, to Priya Sharma's body cooling in the desert sand under a Middle Eastern sun, began 6 months earlier with such ordinary hope that no one could have predicted the devastation ahead. Priya Sharma had arrived in Dubai on a September morning with 2 suitcases and dreams too large to fit in the overhead compartment. She was 24 years old, the first person in her family to study abroad, carrying the weight of her parents' sacrifices and expectations like physical cargo. Her father had taken out loans against their Mumbai apartment to fund her education. Her mother had sold jewelry that had been in the family for generations. Her younger sister Anya had deferred her own college dreams to work and contribute to the household, while Priya pursued her graduate degree. The pressure was immense, but Priya wore it lightly in her carefully curated video calls home. She sent photos of the Burj Khalifa glittering against blue sky, of pristine beaches and luxury malls, of her campus with its modern architecture and international students. What she didn't photograph was the cramped bedroom she shared with another girl in a 4-person apartment in Dira, one of Dubai's older neighborhoods where South Asian migrants clustered in affordable housing. She didn't mention eating the same dal and rice every night to save money, or the part-time job she'd taken at a luxury mall selling watches to tourists, standing for 8-hour shifts in heels that destroyed her feet. She didn't talk about the particular loneliness of being simultaneously surrounded by people and profoundly isolated. Dubai was a city of transients, everyone passing through, everyone focused on extracting maximum benefit before moving on to the next opportunity. Friendships felt temporary by design, and everywhere she looked there were reminders of the hierarchy she occupied, the careful calculations of class and nationality that determined your worth in a place where your passport mattered more than your personality. Priya was brilliant. She'd graduated top of her class in Mumbai, won scholarships, earned her place at the American University of Dubai through merit and determination. But brilliance didn't insulate you from invisibility. In lectures she spoke up, contributed insights, earned praise from professors. In the city beyond campus she became another brown face in service industry uniform, dismissed by the Emirati elite and European expats who formed Dubai's social apex. She maintained the illusion for her family because what was the alternative? Admitting failure. Returning home having burned through their savings and borrowed money for nothing. She video called her sister every Sunday without fail, performed happiness and confidence, talked about her professors and coursework, and the fascinating diversity of her classmates. Anya, 17 and working a retail job to help the family, would ask about the glamorous Dubai life she'd seen in movies, and Priya would nod and smile and feel the gap between perception and reality yawn wider. The only person who seemed to see through her performance was her roommate Anjali, another Indian graduate student who'd been in Dubai 2 years longer and had shed her illusions faster. Anjali worked 3 part-time jobs to afford her rent share, sent money home to Bangalore every month, and talked openly about the reality of being a South Asian woman in the Gulf states. "We're expendable here," Anjali said one night as they ate dinner on their apartment's small balcony overlooking a street market. "The city chews through people like us. We do the work, fill the gaps, keep everything running, and the moment we're not useful anymore, we get deported. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever think you're special or protected, or that the rules don't apply to you." Priya had nodded but hadn't really internalized it. She was young enough to believe exceptionalism was possible, that working hard and being smart could overcome structural disadvantages. She would prove different. She would make her family's sacrifice worthwhile. She would succeed where others merely survived. Her days fell into routine: morning classes at the university, afternoon shifts at the watch store in Dubai Mall where she smiled at customers who looked through her, evenings studying in the apartment while her roommates rotated through their own jobs and obligations, weekends reserved for assignments, and that precious Sunday call home where she maintained the fiction that everything was wonderful. The only deviation from routine was an assignment in her corporate social responsibility course. Students were required to attend and document a charity gala, write an analysis of how corporations used philanthropy for brand management. Most students groaned at the requirement of formal dress in evening hours. Priya saw an opportunity. The gala was at the Burj Al Arab, Dubai's iconic sail-shaped hotel, a place she'd never have reason or means to enter otherwise. She could take photos for her family, prove she was moving in elevated circles, belonged somewhere magnificent even if just for one evening. She borrowed a dress from a classmate. Simple black, nothing that would stand out but appropriate for the setting. She took a taxi she couldn't afford rather than arriving via public bus. She walked into the Burj Al Arab's golden lobby with her notebook and camera and tried to look like she belonged, like she attended such events regularly, like the opulence wasn't making her dizzy with its excessiveness. The ballroom was enormous, filled with round tables where Dubai's elite gathered under crystal chandeliers. Corporate executives and minor royalty and wealthy expats, all performing charity for the cameras while servers in white jackets circulated with champagne and canapés. Priya found a corner table, took notes on the speeches and corporate sponsorship displays, felt acutely aware of her borrowed dress and department store shoes among women wearing jewelry worth more than her family's annual income. She was photographing a charity auction display when a waiter backing away from a nearby table bumped into her, his tray of champagne flutes tilting dangerously toward her materials. She grabbed her notebook, but the camera wasn't fast enough, champagne splashing across the table edge. The waiter apologized profusely in accented English. Priya assured him it was fine, nothing damaged, please don't worry. She was wiping champagne from her notebook when a man appeared beside her, lifting her camera bag to safety, moving her materials to a dry section of the table. "You should sit here instead," he said, gesturing to another table farther from the service flow, less likely to become collateral damage. His English was perfect, barely accented, his manner calm and assured. He helped her relocate her things, made small talk as the waiter retreated. asked what she was documenting. Priya explained about her university assignment, feeling self-conscious about being there for academic work rather than actual charity interest. The man listened with what seemed like genuine attention, asked intelligent questions about her program, her thesis topic. He was older, perhaps 45, wearing a traditional Emirati kandura in brilliant white, with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to deference. Handsome, in an understated way, with gray threading through his dark hair and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Their conversation lasted perhaps 12 minutes. He introduced himself as Rashid, asked about her background, seemed impressed when she mentioned her focus on emerging market analysis. He spoke about Indian business culture with surprising fluency, mentioned spending significant time in Mumbai and Delhi for work. He was easy to talk to in a way that made Priya forget the intimidating setting, forget that she was an imposter in borrowed clothes. When his phone buzzed and he excused himself, he handed her a business card. Simple white cardstock with a name and number, no title or company affiliation. "If you're interested in consulting work related to Indian markets," he said, "I'm always looking for smart perspectives. Feel free to reach out." Priya took the card, thanked him, watched him disappear into the crowd. She assumed it was empty politeness, the kind of meaningless gesture wealthy people made to feel magnanimous. She almost threw the card away that night, but she kept it, docked it into her wallet behind her student ID, told herself it was networking, maintaining professional contacts, the kind of thing her professors encouraged. She didn't think about it much over the next 3 days as she returned to her routine of classes and retail shifts and pretending everything was fine. When her phone buzzed with an unknown number on the third day, she almost didn't answer. But it was mid-afternoon. She was between classes, had a few minutes before her shift started. The voice was familiar. "This is Rashid. We met at the charity gala. I hope I'm not bothering you, but I meant what I said about consulting work. Would you be interested in discussing a project over coffee?" Priya's first instinct was suspicion, but his tone was professional, respectful, making no presumptions. He suggested a Starbucks near her university, public and safe, said he had a business proposal involving market research for Indian consumer segments, thought her academic background would be valuable, offered to pay for her time. She needed money desperately. Her part-time job barely covered her share of rent and food. She'd been skipping meals to save, lying to her family about finances. If this was legitimate consulting work, it could make a real difference. She agreed to meet him the next afternoon. The Starbucks was crowded with university students and business people, the kind of anonymous public space where nothing inappropriate could happen. Priya arrived 10 minutes early, chose a table near the window, tried to calm the nervous energy that made her hands shake slightly. She dressed professionally, brought her portfolio and resume, prepared talking points about her research methodology. She told herself this was legitimate work, that successful people networked like this all the time, that she was being smart and proactive. Rashid arrived exactly on time, still wearing traditional dress but somehow making it feel casual rather than formal. He ordered their coffees without asking what she wanted, which should have irritated her but instead felt thoughtful when he got her order right, remembering details from their brief conversation at the gala. He settled across from her, pulled out a tablet, began explaining the project. His family's business interests included real estate development and logistics, he said. They were exploring expansion into Indian markets, specifically targeting the growing middle class in Tier 2 cities. He needed someone who understood both cultures, could analyze consumer behavior patterns, identify opportunities Western consultants would miss. The work would involve research, reports, presentations to his business partners. He'd pay her 3,000 dirhams per project, multiple projects likely over the coming months. 3,000 dirhams was more than Priya made in a month at the watch store. She tried not to let her desperation show, asked intelligent questions about scope and deliverables, negotiated timeline expectations. Rashid listened to her counterpoints, nodded thoughtfully, adjusted terms to be more favorable. By the end of their hour-long meeting, they had a clear agreement. She would deliver her first market analysis within 2 weeks. He transferred an advance payment to her account before they left the coffee shop. No contract, no paperwork, just trust. It felt almost too easy. Over the next 3 weeks, Priya discovered the work was real and demanding. She researched Indian consumer trends, analyzed demographic data, synthesized insights into a comprehensive report. Rashid reviewed her work carefully, asked probing questions, pushed her thinking. Their meetings moved from coffee shops to hotel lobbies to occasionally his office building in Business Bay, a glass tower where his name commanded immediate deference from security and staff. She started understanding the scale of his wealth and influence. The way people stepped aside when he walked through a room, the deference in voices when they addressed him. He never flaunted it, maintained the same calm professionalism, but power radiated from him like heat. He asked about her life between discussing business, how she was adjusting to Dubai, whether she was homesick, what her family thought of her studies abroad. The questions felt genuine, not intrusive. He listened when she admitted the financial pressure, the weight of her family's expectations. He shared his own story, how he'd studied at Oxford, felt the cultural displacement of being between worlds, understood the burden of family legacy. He mentioned his wife casually during their fourth meeting, establishing boundaries. An arranged marriage 20 years ago, he said, functional but loveless, the way many traditional unions were. 3 children he adored but rarely saw because his business demanded constant travel. He spoke about it matter-of-factly, not complaining, just acknowledging reality. Priya appreciated the transparency. It made everything feel proper, professional. This was mentorship, not romance. He was married, established, decades older. She was his consultant, valued for her intellect and insights. The dynamic was clear, except it started shifting in ways too subtle to name. Their meetings grew longer, conversations drifting from business into philosophy and books and childhood memories. He began texting her outside of work hours, just brief messages. An article he thought she'd find interesting, a recommendation for a restaurant. Once, when she mentioned her phone screen was cracked from dropping it at the watch store, he sent his driver the next day with a new phone, top of the line, with a note saying it was an investment in her productivity. Priya told herself to return it, told herself accepting expensive gifts from a married man crossed lines. But the phone cost more than she made in 2 months, and hers was barely functional. She kept it, justified it as a work tool. The consulting payments increased. 5,000 dirhams per project, then 7,000. More work, but also more generosity. When she mentioned struggling with her apartment's heating during an unusually cold December, he arranged for repairs without being asked. When her roommate Anjali commented on the new laptop she was suddenly using, Priya said she'd saved up for it, uncomfortable with the lie, but more uncomfortable with admitting the truth. She started spending less time at the apartment, more time in hotels and cafes meeting with Rashid. Her roommates noticed but didn't press. Everyone in Dubai had side hustles, secondary income streams, private arrangements that funded their survival. As long as rent was paid, questions weren't asked. It was 6 weeks into their working relationship when everything changed. They were having dinner at a restaurant in Madinat Jumeirah, ostensibly discussing her latest report, but really just talking, laughing at a story he told about a disastrous business trip to Chennai. The waiter brought dessert neither of them had ordered, compliments of the house, recognizing Rashid. After dinner, Rashid suggested showing her his office's view from the 43rd floor since they were nearby. She agreed, assuming other staff would be present. But the building was empty at 9 p.m. on a Friday night, just security nodding them through. His office was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Dubai's illuminated skyline, the kind of view that made you feel like you owned the world. They stood at the window, discussing nothing important, and then he turned to her and kissed her. Priya froze, not from fear but from shock, and a rush of feeling she hadn't let herself acknowledge. He pulled back immediately, apologized, said he'd been fighting his feelings for weeks, but she made him feel something he'd thought was dead, something he couldn't ignore anymore. He wasn't asking her for anything, he said. He just needed her to know this wasn't just business for him, that she mattered in ways beyond consulting reports. She should have left, should have recognized the pattern, the married man pursuing the younger woman, the power imbalance, the inherent danger. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings. But Priya was 24, and lonely and exhausted from performing strength she didn't feel. Rashid made her feel seen in a city that rendered her invisible. He valued her mind, treated her as equal, listened when she spoke, and now he was offering something more. Something that felt like being chosen, being special, mattering. She kissed him back. The affair began that night with both of them agreeing it was complicated and impossible and had to remain secret. Rashid explained the realities, the cultural and legal minefields. Adultery was illegal in the UAE. His family's position meant additional scrutiny. They would need to be extraordinarily careful. But he wanted this, wanted her, was willing to navigate the complications. The following weeks blurred into a double life. During the day, Priya attended classes and maintained her routines. At night, she disappeared into Rashid's world. Hotel rooms registered under business accounts. His beach house when his family traveled. Long drives into the desert where they could be anonymous under stars. Private dinners where she learned to navigate fine dining, wines she couldn't pronounce, conversations about art and politics that made her feel sophisticated. He was generous in ways that overwhelmed her. Jewelry that appeared in velvet boxes. Designer clothes delivered to an address he'd asked her to use for discretion. Experiences she'd never dreamed accessible. A private yacht tour. A weekend in Abu Dhabi at a resort where staff called her madam without question. She stopped working at the watch store. Rashid said it was unnecessary, that she should focus on her studies and their time together. She quit her university consulting work too, when he pointed out she didn't need the stress. He would take care of everything. She could focus on graduating, on building the future he promised they'd share, because he talked about the future constantly, how his marriage was ending emotionally if not legally yet, how he was waiting for the right time to pursue divorce, after certain business deals closed, after his youngest child finished school, after family politics settled. How he'd never felt this way about anyone, how Priya had changed everything for him. She wanted desperately to believe him, started imagining the life he described. Maybe living in London where cultural constraints would be different. Maybe traveling together openly once circumstances changed. Maybe something permanent and real once the obstacles cleared. Her roommate Anjali grew suspicious and then confronted her directly one evening when Priya returned to the apartment to collect clothes. "You're being kept," Anjali said bluntly. "Everyone sees the car that picks you up, the new phone, the expensive things. Whoever he is, this ends badly. You're not the first Indian girl some rich man has played with here, and you won't be the last." Priya dismissed it as jealousy. Anjali didn't understand what she and Rashid had. This was different, real, based on genuine connection, not just money or sex. But small fractures appeared. Rashid became possessive in subtle ways, checked her phone occasionally, said he was just curious about her day but examined her messages more closely than curiosity required. Asked detailed questions about male classmates, became distant when she mentioned study groups that included men. Once, when she laughed too freely with a waiter, he went cold for the rest of the evening, accused her of flirting, made her apologize for disrespecting him. He apologized later for overreacting, said he was just terrified of losing her. That jealousy came from how deeply he cared. She accepted the explanation because what else made sense? He moved her out of the shared apartment into a small flat in Jumeirah, said she needed privacy for studying, that roommates were intrusive. The apartment was beautiful, furnished, with views of the beach. She felt like she descended into another world. What she didn't notice immediately was that the lease was in Rashid's name, not hers. That she was living there by his permission, not her right. Her life contracted around him. She saw her classmates less, made excuses to avoid social gatherings, stopped calling her sister every Sunday, the guilt of lying to Anya too heavy. Let friendships drift, because maintaining them while hiding her real life became exhausting. 4 months into the affair, she realized her entire existence had become dependent on Rashid. Her housing, her money, her daily routines, all tied to his generosity and approval. She had no independent income anymore, no savings because she'd stopped working. Her visa was attached to her university enrollment, which she was barely maintaining, skipping classes to be available when he wanted her. She told herself it was temporary. Once she graduated, she'd find proper work. Once his divorce progressed, things would normalize. Once. The future would fix the present's uncomfortable truths. Then, one morning in her bathroom, she took a pregnancy test because her period was 3 weeks late, and her body felt foreign to itself. She watched the 2 pink lines appear with a feeling of unreality. They'd been careful mostly, used protection usually, but not always, not in moments of passion or assumed safety. She told Rashid that evening, expecting something, joy or panic or concern or at least visible emotion. Instead, his face went carefully blank. He was quiet for a long moment, then spoke with a calmness that felt wrong. "This changes things," he said. "We need to handle this carefully. I'll arrange for a clinic, the best doctors, completely private. You'll be taken care of." Priya stared at him. "You want me to terminate? It's the only realistic option," he said, "given the circumstances. My position, your visa status, the laws here. A child would complicate everything impossibly." She said no. Said she wanted to keep it. Said maybe this was the catalyst they needed, the reason for him to finally leave his marriage, make their relationship legitimate. Rashid's expression shifted then, something cold moving behind his eyes. "You're not thinking clearly," he said. "You have no idea what you're suggesting. A child born outside marriage here, the legal implications, the social destruction. You'd be charged, imprisoned, deported. Your family would be shamed. Is that what you want? She said she'd figure it out, that they could leave Dubai, start over somewhere else, that people manage difficult circumstances all the time. His voice hardened. You're being incredibly stupid and selfish. I've given you everything, supported you, cared for you, elevated your life, and this is how you repay me, with ultimatums and fantasies. They fought properly for the first time, his control cracking, revealing something beneath that frightened her. When she threatened to tell his wife, to make everything public unless he stepped up, he went silent in a way that was more terrifying than anger. He left. For 3 days she heard nothing, texts and calls unanswered. She stayed in the apartment that was his, surviving on food already in the fridge, too afraid to leave, too stubborn to back down. On the 4th day, a woman arrived at the apartment door, professional, polite, introduced herself as Layla, legal counsel for the Al-Maktoum family interests. She had documents and a very clear message. Layla sat on the couch in Priya's apartment like she owned it, which in a legal sense she probably did since Rashid held the lease. She was perhaps 40, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, her English perfect and clinical. She opened a leather portfolio and slid documents across the coffee table with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd handled situations like this before. Let me be very clear about your position, Layla said. Under UAE law, extramarital relations constitute a criminal offense. Pregnancy outside marriage is evidence of that offense. If you proceed with this pregnancy and make any claims about Sheikh Rashid being the father, you will be charged with adultery. The penalties include imprisonment, deportation, and a criminal record that will follow you for life. Priya's hands were shaking. She tried to keep her voice steady. He can't just threaten me into silence. This isn't a threat, Layla said calmly. This is information about the legal framework you're operating within. Sheikh Rashid has considerable resources and family standing. You have a student visa and no independent means. The power differential here is not subtle. But Sheikh Rashid is not without compassion. He's prepared to offer a reasonable solution. She slid more papers forward. A non-disclosure agreement. A termination of whatever relationship existed. Arrangements for a private medical procedure at a clinic that specialized in discretion. And compensation, 50,000 dirhams, enough to finish Priya's degree and start over somewhere else with a clean slate. If you sign these documents and comply with the medical arrangements, Layla continued, Sheikh Rashid will ensure your visa remains valid through graduation, will provide positive references for employment, will make this entire unfortunate situation disappear. You can move forward with your life. Everyone can move forward. And if I don't sign, Priya said, then you will face the full weight of UAE law enforcement. Your family in Mumbai will be contacted as part of the investigation. Your father, who mortgaged his home to send you here, will learn exactly what you've been doing with that opportunity. Your younger sister will live with the shame of having a criminal for a sibling. The Indian media will cover it because scandals involving Gulf royalty always make headlines. Your name will become synonymous with this mistake for everyone you know. Layla's tone never shifted from professional courtesy, which somehow made the threats more effective. She wasn't angry or emotional, just stating facts, explaining consequences. You have 48 hours to decide, Layla said, standing. I would strongly advise that you think very carefully about the life you want versus the life you're choosing. Pride is expensive. Discretion is practical. After she left, Priya sat on the couch surrounded by documents that felt like a suicide pact and tried to think through the panic. She had no money of her own. The apartment would be reclaimed. Her phone was in Rashid's name. Even her laptop had been a gift from him. She'd systematically stripped away every piece of independence, and only now did she see the cage she'd built around herself. She thought about calling her father, but couldn't form the words. How do you tell your parents you've been living as a powerful man's mistress, that you're pregnant, that you've destroyed everything they sacrificed for? How do you admit that level of stupidity and failure? She thought about the Indian consulate, but Layla's words echoed. The law here wasn't ambiguous. Adultery was criminal. Pregnancy was evidence. Even if the consulate wanted to help, what could they actually do against Emirati legal authority and a powerful family's influence? That night, she recorded the voicemail to Anyat, spoke in English first because she wasn't sure who might access her phone, then switched to Hindi, words tumbling out in terrified confession. She needed someone to know the truth, needed someone to remember Rashid's name if she disappeared into the machinery of deportation and legal destruction. Needed her sister to know that whatever happened next, suicide wasn't something Priya would choose. The voicemail sent at 11:47 p.m. Dubai time. Priya waited for her sister to call back, but nothing came. She stayed awake all night, the apartment silent except for the hum of air conditioning and her own racing thoughts. In the morning, she made a decision. She wouldn't sign the documents, wouldn't be bullied into erasing this pregnancy like it was nothing. She'd go to the Indian consulate, explain everything, seek protection through official channels. There had to be a way out that didn't involve destroying herself or the life growing inside her. She dressed carefully, put the legal documents in her bag as evidence, wrote down everything she could remember about Rashid's threats and Layla's visit. She left the apartment at 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning, took a taxi to the consulate in Dubai. The consulate was a bureaucratic maze of waiting rooms and forms and officials who listened with sympathetic expressions but little power. Priya spent 3 hours explaining her situation to a vice consul named Mr. Mehta, a tired-looking man in his 50s who took careful notes and made no promises. "This is very serious," he said, "but our ability to intervene in UAE legal matters is extremely limited. If charges are filed against you, we can provide consular access, help you find legal representation, notify your family. But we cannot prevent arrest or override local law." "What should I do?" Priya asked. Mr. Mehta looked at her with something like pity. "Honestly, the safest option is probably to accept whatever settlement they're offering and leave the country quickly. I've seen cases like this before. The local authorities protect their own. Foreign nationals, especially women in your situation, rarely win these battles." But that felt like surrender, like validation of everything Rashid believed about her disposability. Priya thanked Mr. Mehta, said she needed time to think, left the consulate with no better options than when she'd arrived. She didn't go back to the apartment. Some instinct told her returning there was dangerous. Instead, she went to her old apartment in Dira, the one she'd shared with roommates. Anjali was home, working on her laptop, and looked up in surprise when Priya knocked. "I need help," Priya said, and started crying for the first time since this nightmare began. Anjali listened to everything, didn't say "I told you so" even though she clearly wanted to, made tea and let Priya talk through the situation. When Priya finished, Anjali was quiet for a long moment. "You can't fight him legally," she finally said, "but you can expose him. Social media, Indian news outlets, make enough noise that he can't just make you disappear quietly. Rich men here hate scandals. Bad publicity is sometimes the only leverage powerless people have." Priya considered it, but exposure meant her family learning everything, meant shame and judgment and confirming every fear her parents had about sending their daughter abroad. It meant becoming a cautionary tale rather than a success story. She stayed with Anjali that night, sleeping on the couch, trying to formulate a plan. She'd saved some evidence on a cloud account months ago, back when she'd still had enough clarity to worry about needing insurance. Messages from Rashid, photos they'd taken together, financial transfers. Proof the affair existed even if it couldn't prove his threats. The next morning, Friday, she decided to go to a women's rights organization she'd found online. Maybe they had resources, connections, strategies for situations like hers. She left Anjali's apartment around 10 a.m., took the metro to avoid leaving a taxi trail, walked through neighborhoods she barely knew. She never made it to the organization's office. What happened in those hours between leaving Anjali's apartment and Priya's body being discovered in the desert near Hatta would never be fully established. The official investigation would be cursory. The initial report rushed. Suicide, they concluded. A distraught foreign student, pregnant and unmarried, facing deportation in shame, who'd driven or been driven to the desert and thrown herself from a rocky outcrop. The evidence that contradicted that narrative would emerge slowly. The fact that Priya didn't own a car and no taxi or rideshare record showed her traveling to Hatta. The bruising on her wrists consistent with restraint. The angle of injury suggesting she'd been pushed rather than jumped. The missing phone and passport that were never recovered. But by the time those inconsistencies became public, Priya Sharma was already dead 3 days, her body discovered by hikers on a Sunday morning, the desert heat having accelerated decomposition enough to complicate forensic analysis. Her father flew to Dubai on an emergency visa, navigated the nightmare of identifying remains and arranging repatriation. He met with police who were polite but unhelpful, with consulate officials who expressed sympathy but offered little action. He tried to meet with Rashid's family, was turned away by security, threatened with legal action if he continued to harass prominent citizens with baseless accusations. Anya, back in Mumbai, began posting on social media. She shared the voicemail, Priya's terrified voice speaking Hindi about a man named Rashid. She posted photos of her sister, demanded investigation, tagged Indian news outlets and human rights organizations. The story gained traction slowly, then explosively. Indian media loved narratives about their citizens victimized abroad, especially involving Gulf royalty. Under mounting pressure and diplomatic scrutiny, Dubai police reopened the investigation. A second autopsy revealed the inconsistencies the first had glossed over. The case went from closed suicide to suspicious death. Rashid's name emerged through Priya's cloud-saved evidence that Anya accessed, messages and photos that proved the affair, the pregnancy, the coercion. Dubai authorities found themselves in an impossible position. The evidence suggested foul play. But charging a member of the Al-Maktoum family, even a minor branch, with murder or conspiracy to murder would be politically and socially explosive. The compromise they reached satisfied no one but allowed everyone to save face. Rashid was charged not with murder but with adultery and coercion. The murder investigation remained technically open but with no active pursuit. He received a substantial fine, 2 years of house arrest, and the sort of scandal that damaged but didn't destroy someone with his family connections. His wife divorced him quietly. His business interests took a hit but survived. Within 5 years, he'd rehabilitated his reputation enough to return to public life, the whole incident becoming a cautionary footnote in his biography. Priya's family received a settlement. Blood money, they called it. 2 million dirhams that couldn't buy back their daughter but could at least pay off the loans her education had cost them. They took her body home to Mumbai. The funeral was attended by hundreds. People who'd never known Priya but came to pay respects to a story that had gripped the nation. Anaya kept fighting. She filed civil suits that went nowhere. She contacted international human rights organizations who documented the case but couldn't prosecute across borders. She maintained Priya's social media presence, posting updates about the stalled investigation, about justice delayed and denied. The Indian student community in Dubai talked about Priya in whispers. Her story became legend, the cautionary tale older students told newcomers. Be careful who you trust. Understand the power dynamics. Know that some men see foreign women as disposable entertainment. Remember what happened to Priya Sharma. Years passed. The headlines faded. Rashid's name stopped appearing in news searches. The investigation file gathered dust in a police archive. The only people who still remembered with sharp grief were the Sharmas, a family in Mumbai who'd lost their brightest star to a city that promised dreams and delivered nightmares. Anya still plays the voicemail sometimes late at night. Her sister's voice, shaking but determined, saying, "Remember the name Rashid. Remember what happens when you believe powerful men who promise you the world." The message cuts off mid-sentence, frozen in that moment before everything collapsed. Priya Sharma came to Dubai the way millions do, chasing education and opportunity, and a better life than the one they left behind. She met a man who seemed kind and generous and offered something that looked like love. She made choices that felt like agency but were really just selections from a menu someone else had written. And when she finally understood the trap, when she tried to assert autonomy over her own body and future, the machinery of power and law ground her into silence. The desert holds many secrets, bodies buried under sand and stone, and official reports that conclude convenient narratives. Priya's story is one among many, distinguished only by the fact that her sister refused to let her disappear completely. The voicemail exists as evidence and memorial. A voice from beyond death saying this happened, witness it, remember it, don't let them write me out of existence. In the end, Priya learned what countless women before her have learned across cultures and centuries, that some cages are made of gold, and some predators wear expensive clothes, and some cities devour the vulnerable, while celebrating themselves as progressive and modern. That when you're foreign and female and foolish enough to believe in love across insurmountable power gaps, the price of that belief is measured in lives, and that justice, when it comes at all, comes too late and too small to matter to the dead, only to those left behind who carry their names forward like weapons against forgetting.